Cultivating intrinsic motivation is the holy grail for getting things done in college. Intrinsic motivation makes you work harder, smarter, longer, and with a better headspace than when you motivate yourself like a donkey with a carrot on a stick. And yeah, many students I know at Cornell can only get things done through a 9 p.m. caffeine study marathon the night before an exam. So we need to learn how to cultivate intrinsic motivation, because the key to defeating procrastination and burnout is making work so intrinsically fun you want to do it. In this video, I will give 7 of my most powerful tips for cultivating intrinsic motivation in college after tens of hours of psychological research and personal experience. First, I will explain what intrinsic motivation is, and then I will explain the 7 tips, which are: don't make the big mistake of rewards and punishment, realize your intelligence isn't fixed, build a growth mindset, prioritize identified motivation over intrinsic and extrinsic, follow the actions framework to enter flow more consistently, surround yourself with people you want to be like, build autonomy in your work, and gamify your college experience. Turn that Ting into a game. Before we move into the 7 tips, we must define intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is motivation to do something that emanates from the self. The classic example is your motivation to play video games. We often play video games as an end in themselves rather than for some tangible outside reward. Personally, I play for the satisfying screams and blood of my enemies as their souls float to the dark depths of the black hole that is death. In Total Warhammer 3, intrinsic motivation can make you do activities without any need for extrinsic rewards. Extrinsic motivation, however, is motivation to do something because of an outside self-reward or punishment. For example, doing an assignment mostly so you don't miss the deadline comes from extrinsic motivation. You're motivated out of a fear of a loss to your grades. Without the deadline, you likely wouldn't do the assignment. Same with pursuing a major at college, because your parents or society said it was a good idea. Extrinsic motivation, therefore, makes you do activities that you might not have with no outside incentive. A critical misconception about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is they aren't mutually exclusive. They exist on a spectrum. You can have both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation for an activity, and the degree to which you have either can shift over time. This is great news for us because it means you can shift activities where you are currently fueled mainly through extrinsic motivation to be primarily driven by intrinsic motivation. Now, let's explore the 7 tips for doing so. Number 1, don't make the big mistake of rewards and punishments. The biggest mistake people make regarding intrinsic motivation is they give themselves extrinsic rewards for things they want to do intrinsically. If you've ever rewarded yourself for going to the gym or doing a college homework assignment, you've fallen for this mistake. The reason this is so bad is illuminated by a study done by Lepper et al. In 1973. They split class of preschoolers into 3 groups, all of whom loved playing with magic markers intrinsically. Then they had a visitor come into the classroom and watch them play with the markers. Group 3 was told they would get a reward for playing with the markers. After the visitor left, Group 3 was given a good player award. Group 2 was unexpectedly given a good player award, and Group 1 was left alone. When the children were given access to the magic markers the following day without the visitor, those in Group 3 spent significantly less time playing with the magic markers and drew with less quality than those in Group 2 or 1. The children in Group 3 had suffered from what Lepper and colleagues coined the over-justification effect, which describes how people are rewarded for activities they do intrinsically, lose intrinsic motivation to do the activity when there is no reward or a desensitized reward. The activity has been over-justified. This is the big issue with giving yourself rewards for activities you want to build intrinsic motivation in, like going to the gym or doing homework. It undermines your intrinsic motivation to do the activity for itself. Luckily, the study and many others highlight a possible solution. If you're going to use rewards to motivate yourself to do something, use intermittent novel rewards rather than predictable tangible ones. As seen in the study, children in Group 2 who got the good player award unexpectedly didn't lose intrinsic motivation for the activity the next day. This has an evolutionary explanation. A predictable reward that stops might be a resource that is run out. However, an unpredictable reward that stops might be a random cessation between rewards. Thus, persisting longer in activities with unpredictable rewards make sense, even if the rewards have stopped. You can apply this in two main ways at college. Give yourself rewards to commit in particularly tough days, and give yourself random rewards at unpredictable intervals. Take the gym, for example. Most days you should go to the gym as an end in itself. But if you ever feel like Popeye before eating spinach, feel free to give yourself that extra kick to get you going. Maybe listen to your favorite playlist on Spotify or play a fun video game afterward. By only giving yourself rewards for the particularly tough days, you won't undermine the intrinsic motivation to do the activity for itself. Secondly, give yourself rewards at unpredictable intervals. Create a list of fun, creative rewards for which you can flip a coin or roll a die to see what you get. Maybe it's so that some days you don't get any rewards and others do. This adds some curiosity, spunk, pizzazz. By giving yourself random rewards at unpredictable intervals, you effectively make yourself like group 2 in the preschool study. So when should you use extrinsic motivation? Extrinsic motivation can be incredible for two reasons. It creates a foundation to allow for intrinsic motivation, and it can boost motivation for uncreative, boring tasks. Firstly, it creates a foundation to allow for intrinsic motivation. It's safe to say that if we weren't getting a degree at college, most students wouldn't do the work they're doing, even with intrinsic motivation. So the degree gives people a foundation of extrinsic motivation to build intrinsic motivation. Therefore, some baseline of extrinsic motivation in some activities isn't always bad. Secondly, it can boost motivation for uncreative, boring tasks. I'm currently TAing for a cooking class, which as a whole is fun, but grading the sensory evaluations makes me more depressed than playing Dark Souls 3. So whenever I grade them, I play some of my favorite music and give myself a Diet Coke. Let me tell you, there is nothing like grading sensory evaluations with Stardew Valley music in the background while drinking poison. Number 2, realize your intelligence isn't fixed. Build a growth mindset. The growth mindset was first defined by researcher Carol Dweck in her 2006 book Mindset. In it, she explains people with a growth mindset believe their skills and intelligence can be improved through hard work and overcoming failure. People with a growth mindset see the brain as a muscle that grows stronger and smarter with rigorous learning experiences. People with a fixed mindset, however, believe their skills are fixed and therefore shudder from failure and challenge. If you have a fixed mindset, you're doomed. You should give up. I'm just kidding. Fortunately, we can ingrain a growth mindset even if we start with a fixed mindset in an activity. And developing a growth mindset is incredible for building intrinsic motivation because it turns every experience into an opportunity to grow. There's no need for some extrinsic reward. The valuable learning is in the reward in itself. Everything can become intrinsically motivating. So how can we cultivate a growth mindset? The first step comes with realizing what the growth mindset is in the first place and ingraining it into your very being. In every activity you attend, think about how you can frame it to fit the growth mindset. For example, instead of framing an exam as an anxiety-building annoyance, frame it as a test of your skills. One of my favorite frames is to frame an activity like a game. In games, we naturally challenge ourselves because we intuitively understand failure is part of the process. By framing activities as learning experiences, you can motivate yourself to pursue challenges even in the face of failure. The second step comes with challenging yourself. We generally learn more from failure than from success. So challenging yourself by stepping out of your comfort zone is a fantastic way to learn. For your next essay, try writing in a different style than you usually would. For your next reading assignment, try summarizing the passage in your head afterward. Or for your next exam, try doing it blindfolded, because that would certainly be challenging. Okay, maybe not that last one, but challenging yourself in these ways is bound to lead to failure, leading to more growth. Taking these two steps can help you build a growth mindset and in turn build the intrinsic motivation you want to have in college. Number 3, prioritize identified motivation over intrinsic and extrinsic. Hold on, hasn't this whole video been about cultivating intrinsic motivation? It has, but as amazing as intrinsic motivation is, I think it often overshadows its more powerful cousin, identified motivation. Identified motivation is the motivation to do something because you have integrated the importance of doing the thing into your very identity. Identified motivation is so powerful because of all three motivations, it's arguably the most sustainable and healthy over the long term. Willpower, shame, extrinsic reward, and punishment can work in the short term, and even over the long term, they can lead to an unhealthy relationship with motivation. And intrinsic motivation, while amazing, doesn't always create a sense of urgency to do tasks earlier rather than later. In addition, many activities in life start extrinsically motivated, and we build intrinsic motivation over time. Passion builds over time, and identified motivation is a reliable way to motivate yourself to do something long enough that you can build intrinsic motivation for it. There are 3 ways to develop identified motivation. Firstly, integrate the activity you want to do into your identity. For example, if you want to read more while in college, identify as someone that values lifelong learning. And what does someone that values lifelong learning do? They read outside of their college classes. Set identity-based goals rather than outcome-based goals. For example, you go to the gym not to get six-pack abs, but because you're the type of person that cares about your health. Outcome-based goals are temporary and fleeting. Identity-based goals can be lifelong. Try and associate reward for an activity with the challenge of the activity itself. For example, in the most challenging parts of writing, learn to appreciate that difficulty. This way, you won't feel a need for some extrinsic reward outside the activity. Using these 3 tips, you can build identified motivation for a reliable, sustainable, and healthy pool of long-term motivation. Fourth, follow the actions framework to enter flow more consistently. My 4th tip for cultivating intrinsic motivation at college is to follow the actions framework to enter flow more consistently. Flow, proposed by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in his book Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, is a state which occurs when all worldly matters other than the activity you're doing seem to dissipate and we become fully immersed in the present. For example, the feeling of hours passing by in minutes while building nuclear weaponry as Gandhi in Civ 6. Research by Gamify shows that flow leads to optimal experiences, one of the most psychologically enjoyable states you can have. It's for this reason that flow is incredibly intrinsically motivating. Therefore, making your activities more conducive to flow is one of the best ways to develop intrinsic motivation. There are 7 elements to entering the flow state, which I distill in the acronym ACTIONS. I call it this because if you fulfill all of the 7 elements of it, you can take any action with confidence it can become a flow experience. I've written and recorded videos extensively about this in my 2-part series on gamification and flow, which you can check out up above. Number 5, surround yourself with people you want to be like, unless they don't like peanut butter. According to social comparison theory by Festinger in 1954, we evaluate ourselves and build self-concept by comparing ourselves to others we identify with in our physical or social environment, even when more objective metrics are available. In one study by Medvik, Madely, and Gailovich in 1995, Olympic silver medalists were shown to have lower self-esteem than bronze gold medalists, despite the silver medalists objectively receiving the better reward. It's theorized the silver medalists were comparing themselves to the gold medalists, whereas the bronze medalists were comparing themselves to everyone who didn't receive a medal. In other words, the silver medalists felt worse by their standing because they compared themselves to the other medalists rather than to the objective standing of everyone in the event. It follows, therefore, that you're socially influenced predominantly by the 5 people you interact with most. If your peers smoke, you're more likely to smoke. If your peers love learning, you're likelier to love learning. And if your peers love Fallout 76, then you should find different peers. This suggests that if you want to become intrinsically motivated to do something, surround yourself with people that are slightly better than you at that thing, so that your self-esteem doesn't get punched in the gut, but you're still motivated. For example, say you wanted to become a better Dungeons & Dragons dungeon master while at college. Sounds really obvious, but one of the best things you can do is surround yourself with Dungeons & Dragons dungeon masters. Say that 5 times fast. Dungeons & Dragons dungeon masters. Oh my God. Then a little better than you are. And this will build intrinsic motivation because they're in your immediate environment, but also you feel like your skills aren't that far behind. You can apply the same logic to all aspects of college, whether writing, studying, speaking, doing comedy, etc. Number 6 is build autonomy in your work. Autonomy is an aspect of self-determination theory, which was proposed by the researchers DC and Ryan in their book Drive. That refers to the degree of control you feel you have over your work, whether it be in terms of task, which is what task you're doing, the time, which is when you do it, the technique, which is how you do it, and the team, which is who you do it with. According to research in STT, more autonomy in work boosts intrinsic motivation. The problem is, without intervention, most college is pretty barren of autonomy. autonomy, professors typically tell you the task, the time, the team, and the technique that you will be doing to complete something. Even for more open-ended things like essays, students often resort to standard methods instead of taking autonomy and breaking out of the mold. This hurts intrinsic motivation because students don't feel in control of their learning. They feel like passengers in a car that has, well, lost its steering wheel. The solution is to build autonomy in your work. The your is the important part here. Stop seeing the work given to you in college at face value. Understand you can control what, how, and when to do it, as well as with who to do it, if you fight for it. Of course, this isn't the case for every assignment, but there are many times when it is. For example, one of my classes requires writing 6 essays over the semester, and most students I've noticed write these essays in what I can only describe as lacking depth, emotion, and a little bit of a pizzazz. So I decided to break the mold. For the last 2 essays in the class, I've purposely written in a conversational blog post style as an experiment. The essays are peer graded, and for both of them, I received over a 90. Students loved it. Apart from getting a better grade, I noticed I had more intrinsic motivation for the writing process. It felt invigorating, taking autonomy over the way I went about writing the essay. I was in control over the task, the technique, the time, and the team. When I did the assignment, for a few days, I was like the god of essays, the Zeus of essays. And that's right, because I said I was. You can do the same in your own college work. 7th, you can gamify your college experience. Turn that Ting into a game. As mentioned earlier, games are the classic example of intrinsic motivation. Most of the time, we play video games as an end in itself, rather than for some tangible outside reward. We can take insight from video games by learning what it is about them that's so engaging, and then applying that to real life. Not only will this build intrinsic motivation because the activity becomes more engaging and fun, but it'll also lead to more growth because framing activities like a game makes us more willing to pursue challenges that could lead to failure. I've written extensively on how to gamify your life to enjoy learning and studying, as well as how to gamify your life to enter flow more consistently, which you can check out up above. So many students I know at Cornell aren't enjoying their student lives. They don't enjoy learning, are motivated chiefly by extrinsic incentives, and aren't in a good headspace. You don't have to be the same. By following these 7 tips and building intrinsic motivation, you can fall in love with school learning again. You won't make the big mistake of motivating yourself through rewards. Instead, you'll ingrain a growth mindset and strive toward challenges. Knowing failure makes you better. The activities important to you will become a part of your identity. You will enter a beautiful state of flow throughout all of your day. You'll surround yourself with people that bring you up instead of down. You will take autonomy over your work. And finally, you will gamify your school learning so you can better play the game of life. But not that board game crap. That thing is terrible. If you want to learn how to build more intrinsic motivation in note-taking and studying, John Maverick, a fellow YouTuber, and I have created Obsidian University, a course which is meant to help you learn to ingrain a systemized process for note-taking and studying inside of Obsidian. It's this course that helped us overcome our own video game addictions by making note-taking the real life most fun game imaginable. We built so much intrinsic motivation by learning how to note-take in Obsidian that we didn't feel the need to play video games anymore. And you can do the same. Learn more about Obsidian University in the description below. Build a knowledge base that scales over semesters and connects between classes. Join the next era of student learning. Students that are motivated by intrinsic reward.